We have breaking news from the Red Sea today. A U.S. F-18 fighter jet has literally rolled off the deck of the USS Harry Truman into the Red Sea. One of the most remarkable things that I can't even remember. It's been decades since we've heard anything like this has happened. And it really bears some examination of exactly what's going on, what happened, and what is the whole purpose of these ships being out there anyway? What is America's vital national interest? And is this working? Those are the questions that really need to be asked. Right now, everybody's kind of focused on what happens, and I do want to touch on that because it is important to discuss. But also, we need to look at the bigger picture. That's one of the things we have this show for, and why we have the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. So let's first of all take a look at it. What's being reported is what actually happened. Now, as you may know, the USS Harry S. Truman, and there's actually two aircraft carrier battle groups in the region right now. One of them right now, at least the Truman aircraft battle group, is operating in the Red Sea, ostensibly to try and keep the Red Sea open to traffic. And there's been an ongoing situation really since October 2023, when the Houthis decided that they're going to stand in solidarity with their brethren in Gaza during the Israeli-Hamas war, because they say, you guys are killing too many innocent Palestinian people, and we want to, do whatever we can to be in solidarity. So that they said they're going to start attacking any shipping going to Israel in the Red Sea. And you may recall the Biden administration tried for a long time to try to bring them to their heels. The Israelis tried to bring them to their heels. None of it worked. Well, starting on about the 15th of March of this year, the Trump administration decided they would give their hand at it, and that they would start attacking the Houthis. And it was this big attack on the 15th of March. And we said it was going to be this relentless bombing campaign, et cetera. Well, problem is the Houthis didn't get our memo, because they said, yeah, we've been doing this a long time, and we're going to continue to do it. So now then we're really operating on almost a no-win situation, because the question is, now what are you going to do? Because our ships have been attacked several times, and we've been able to knock the weapons down. There was one time reported during the Biden administration to where one of the missiles got so close that it was actually almost got to the ship and was knocked down by kind of like a Gatling gun right before it impacted. So it was very close. It was a near miss. And I've always said, one of our ships gets hit and it changes the game entirely. And so far that hasn't happened. But now then, what's being reported by the Pentagon was apparently the Harry S. Truman came under fire from a missile. And the ship had to take evasive action. And it's a remarkable thing that, Gary, if you can replay that video there, because I want to comment on a part of what happened there. You see right here, this is I think this is the Gerald R. Ford actually going through time trials, and you see how sharp that thing is when it's turning like that. And these things are apparently very maneuverable, but when you make these huge moves with these very large ships, they list very heavily over to the side. From what we can understand, from what's being reported, there was an in process. That shot there is really the money shot, because you can see how far over that thing is tilting. Obviously, anything on the deck that would be on there at the time has to be battened down, or it can roll off, and that's apparently what happened. One of the aircraft, one of the F-18 Super Hornets, was being moved by a tractor on board, when all of a sudden, apparently, the radar signaled that there was an incoming missile, and they had to take evasive action. And as you can see there, when they have to do that, they don't have any time to do anything, so they, I'm sure, sound some alarm, but there wasn't time to get the ship knocked down, or to get the aircraft battened down, so that when they had that big hard shift to the right you saw there on that evasive maneuver, apparently it literally rolled into the sea, both the aircraft and the tractor itself. According to the reports, the crew was able to get out of the way. One person was slightly injured, but no one lost their lives. So it's really good in that regard. We're very grateful for that. I did take the opportunity today. We're going to have British Commodore Steve Jeremy on later this week. We've had him on many times, a friend of the show. But since he is actually operated on an aircraft carrier in combat, I reached out to him this morning and asked him if he could explain to us what may have happened here. If you could just tell us a little bit about what, as far as you know anyway, from the media reports, what do you think happened, and experience with this?
Yeah, I mean, the point about aircraft on aircraft carriers is that they need to be glued down onto the deck, and that if the ship's moving a lot and they're not glued, I say glued, I'm using that as a sort of shorthand for chocking the aircraft, but also across an aircraft carrier flight deck, there are lots of hard points which you use metal chains to actually lock the aircraft on when it's on deck. And when you're moving the aircraft, those chains are unleashed, and you've got a handler, an electrical handler, and the deck crew are working with it. But then when you've got the aircraft where you want it, and on a carrier, you're always moving aircraft around. But when you've got it to where you want it, then you chock it down, lock it down, and it should be good to go. But of course, the issue here is that if you're under attack or air attack, and you're moving quickly, then those things can sort of fall out of phase. This actually happened to us in HMS Invincible during the Falklands War, where actually we lost a Sea Harrier over the side. I think I was actually airborne at the time, or actually we might have been in San Carlos. But the aircraft, the flight deck was actually quite slippery, and I don't think it was under air attack. And anyway, the nose mill on the aircraft actually pivoted, and the aircraft went over the side. The pilot was in it at the time, and he ejected. For this one, it's difficult to say without knowing about the circumstances, Danny. But if they were under attack and the ship was manoeuvring, then it could have been a breakdown in communications between the four key elements of this. So you've got in the ship, you've got the CIC, Combat Information Center in America. It's an operations room in Britain, but it's the same thing. Down in the bowels of the ship, and they're the people who've got all the radars on, and they're giving the warnings of stuff coming in. You've got the bridge, who are actually handling the ship's rudders and engines. You've got what we call FLICO, and I guess it's the same in an American carrier, but where you coordinate from the flight deck. And when you look up on the island of a carrier, then there's a glass area where people can look out over the whole of the deck. And then last is the flight deck itself, and FLICO and the bridge and the operations room, CIC and the flight deck need to keep each other in close conversation, because if the ship suddenly makes a hard turn to port or to starboard, you need to make sure that all the jets and all the helicopters and everything that's on the deck is actually chained down. So I would guess that that's probably what's happened, but it's difficult.
And how long, if you can say, from the time, let's say they're on the radar room where they say, hey, we've got an incoming missile or a drone or something like that, how much time do you have before you have to start taking evasive maneuvers?
Oh, they'll want to move quickly, but usually you have unless it's a pop-up target, which is a target which is you hadn't expected, then usually there's a bit of time, because actually you would expect to see it at range, especially if they've got Hawkeyes airborne, so the air surveillance aircraft airborne. If they've got those airborne, then you'd expect to see most targets at some range. But if it's a pop-up target, then you're talking probably sort of could be 10, 15, 20 seconds or so before you take the maneuver. At the most, you really want to be moving quickly, really. So
if it's a situation to where they were already towing, because apparently there was a tractor that was moving an aircraft somewhere on the deck, so it could be that there wasn't time to actually warn them, hey, get that thing locked down. We have to maneuver now. I mean, is that a fair possibility?
It is. I mean, if it's actually the tractors are actually they're electric battery-driven tractors, and they're usually on the nose of the aircraft or the tail of some helicopters. So they're quite flexible. But when the aircraft's being moved, then you've got, as well as the tractor driver, you've also got a number of people who are walking with the aircraft with chocks and chains ready to lash it down. And as soon as it's in position, then you'll lash it down. So again, without knowing, I mean, it could have been a failure of a lashing or something like that, or on incorrect lashing. But again, I would suspect that if the aircraft was being maneuvered, then it was in transit from one lockdown position to another lockdown position, or indeed for a launch. It's difficult to say. Again, as the aircraft are coming, especially with an American carrier, you've got a large number of launch. You might be launching sort of 8 jets, all in a stream ready to go onto the catapult, or recovering them as well. it makes for a very, very busy time on the flight deck. And if something comes in during that and it's a short notice target, then I can imagine that an accident could have happened.
Well, let's say it was a pop-up situation. What are the defensive measures that a ship of that size can engage in, and how much time does it have from the time they identify the target or the incoming missile before I don't guess impact is the right word, before it reaches the aircraft itself? Meaning, how much time do you have to take these kind of maneuvers?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the missile and if it's a high level missile. So it's not what I would call sea skimming. Then you've usually got a lot of time because you see it a long way out. You might see it sort of 40, 50, 100 miles out, in which time you do have time. Depends how fast it's going. If you've got a low-level missile, then you could be talking about sort of 30 seconds. I mean, Exocet in my time, was a low-level missile. It's coming in at about 12 meters. So you don't, because of the curvature of the Earth, you just don't see it on radar unless you've got airborne early warning there. But I would have expected the Hawkeyes to be airborne, and if that's the case, you would have expected them to pick up the missile. The point about the missiles, they're coming in fast, so the radars that you tend to use to identify them are pulse Doppler radars, which means that they react to speed, and they get the speed of the radar return tells them that something's coming in quickly. So you'd expect to see it at low level. But again, what the other problem they have, though, of course, is that operating deep water, so that's away from the shore, you've got more time. Whereas if you're operating close to shore and the missile's coming off the shore, then often you can't see it in the radar clutter offshore. So they've got much less sea room in the Red Sea than deeper waters out in the Indian Ocean or elsewhere.
And what other kind of defensive measures? I assume there's some sort of counter missiles. Yeah,
there's rough. Again, bear in mind I'm pretty out of date, but there are, broadly speaking, three really. I suppose arguably four. But the firstly is what we call soft kill. So that's where it's jamming or decoying. So you can either jam the missile head or jam the targeting system, which is targeting the missile, or you can put chaff, classically. Chaff rockets. So the chaff rocket essentially goes up in the air, comes down, and it makes a cloud of chaff particles which look like a ship. And what you'd often do with those, if you fired a set of 6 chaff missiles, for example, you would then turn the ship so the ship ran in the same direction as the wind. And so suddenly the missile, instead of having one target, which is the ship's, has 7 targets. And usually they'll tend to pick up one of the closest targets, which is not the one in the middle, which is the ship. So that's soft kill. And then there's hard kill, which is either sort of medium to short range hard kill, which was called air defense, which can be, I don't know what block standards that the cruisers that will be with the carrier group have got. But anyway, they're quite long-range missiles and got good performance at short range as well. You need to fire a couple per missile. But then you get into shorter range where you've got the ship's own missiles. I have a feeling that the current system used by the Americans is called RAM, Rolling Airframe Missile, which is a German device from memory. But they can be in the order of 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 kilometers, that sort of a range. So that's about half those, roughly speaking, for miles, a little bit less than that. Then finally you get a point defense, which is a classic phalanx weapon system, which is a Gatling gun. And this phalanx or goalkeeper phalanx, from memory, I had two on board HMS Cardiff, and they're both 20 mil with a range of about a mile. Very effective, but a range of about a mile, and they're very good at taking down a missile and then taking down another missile. But it really is white to the eyes when you're into that sort of missile for a ship.
Now, I know that I believe it was in the year 2024 during the Biden administration when they were first taking on the Houthis here. There was at least one situation where one of the American ships, and they never gave all the details, had to use that phalanx gun because all the other levels of things had not stopped the missile. And it was apparently very, very close to hitting our ship at that time. Just as best as you understand, what is the risk to the American flotilla that are conducting this operation in the Red Sea to the Houthis?
Again, without knowing what sort of attack it would be, it's difficult to say, because that I wasn't aware of that. I think I had heard that there have been some quite successful attacks, but if you're getting into point defence, I mean, that's what it's designed for. So it's designed, and it's good at shooting down things at close range. The problem, of course, though, is that it is your last line of defence until you actually get into damage control. You really want to avoid that if at all possible. I mean, it's there for a purpose, and it sounds like it worked. But in terms of what were the flotilla, or what were the carrier strike group? What's the level of threat they're at? Well, for a missile to get that close, you would have been a fairly high level of threat. What's difficult to know is whether that was an individual leaker, which is a missile which gets through and people haven't spotted, or whether it's part of a larger coordinated attack. And there things get more difficult, because you've got more weapons in the air to actually engage. And generally speaking, you engage the closer ones first, and the leakers later on. So,
and so last question: what is the threat to? And we'll just keep it at the aircraft carrier, since that's what's involved here. To not just one missile coming from the Houthis, but what if they say launch 5 or 10 or 15? Is the defense system, capable of defending against that many targets at the same time?
I would expect that. Yeah, the answer is yes. I would expect because I would expect the cruisers and the destroyers, the surface air missile cruisers and destroyers, to be capable of taking down a number of missiles. I wouldn't like to give you a figure, but again, it's not quite as simple as they'll get straight through, because of course those missiles have to be targeted, and the key thing is what's called terminal phase guidance. So it's no good firing the missiles to a sort of rough area of sea and hoping that it'll hit the ship. It's got to be extremely precise, and it's not like onshore where, if you're firing at an airfield, then it doesn't change its address. The lat long is always the same. Whereas if you're firing a ship, it's moving all the time. So that's why we may well have had zigzagging, which is that depending on how that terminal guidance was delivered, if indeed it was delivered. Then if it's provided by the missile itself, its own radar seeker head, then it's more difficult to decoy, rather than if it's provided by a third party, which is providing guidance to the missile, where you've got more opportunities to actually get into the kill chain or the comms chain between the missile and the third party guider.
And that was Commodore Jeremy. Listen, I really appreciate him on short notice, and he was in his office there. He just literally just kind of turned his computer sideways and had that blank wall back behind him. That's some of you may have made a comment about the background being kind of sparse. Well, that was why, because he agreed to come on really short notice. So we're very grateful for his expertise on that. Very fascinating information here. So that's basically the bottom line about what happened. Now then, I want to take a look at what is the context of this, and does it make any sense to continue making these kinds of risks? If our military is taking on an operation that is related to American national security, then losses, combat losses, or accidents, or however you want to characterize this one, could be very much worth it. It could be just the cost of doing business. That's just how it works. That's why you have a military. But if the mission itself is not related to American national security or is failing, then you have to reevaluate, is this something we want to keep doing? Now, I think you probably know where this is going with us already, because we've been talking about this mission has been going on for a long time, and not just since March 15th. But we actually have to back up even before the Biden administration, because this goes back to 2015 when the Saudi Arabians got into a tiff with the Houthis and basically got into a war with them. And it was primarily an air war. They used all kinds of aircraft and they got lots of help from Obama, because he decided it's kind of a quid pro quo deal. We were trying to get them to help us out with something, and they wanted our help with that. So he said, yes, sure, whatever, we'll do that. We'll take care of that too. And so for a long time, we were doing all this. We were helping them with aerial refueling, with ammunition, I think, intelligence support, et cetera. We tried to say there's a degree of separation. but there was so many people being killed in Yemen. I mean, it was just a horrible situation. Well, Saudi Arabia never succeeded in knocking the Houthis out. That was their stated objective, and it didn't work. There was just I don't even know how many thousands of airstrikes there were over those years, but they never stopped them. They never got them out. So then they just kind of stopped one day. They didn't really announce a whole lot. It didn't come to an end. I think they just moved on. And so it was dormant for a period of time. Now comes October 7th, 2023, where the Hamas fighters, had that terrible terrorist attack against the Israeli civilians, killed a lot of people, and then Israel decided to respond. Now, as we've said all the time, if a country is attacked by a terrorist attack, and especially when over 1,000 civilians are killed, there's no country on the planet that's not going to respond to that. And so they had every right to do so, even if I can say it was not done in a vacuum. And there was a lot of things that led up to that, which didn't make it a surprise. But once that has happened, it's in the inherent right of anyone to defend themselves. But what is not in the inherent right of everyone is to go overboard and to just go on this systematic situation where you're basically taking advantage of this and now killing large numbers of innocent people and killing large numbers of civilians. And that's what's been happening here. As a consequence of that, you had the Houthis saying, hey, we're not going to just sit passively by and allow the Israel to continue killing so many people in Palestine areas. And to destroy, basically just start eliminating their ability to even sustain life in the strip. And so they said, until you stop that attack, we're going to attack Red Sea shipping. Anything going to Israel through the Red Sea, we're going to start attacking it. And they attacked a number of ships. There's a number that were actually hit, and then it significantly lowered the amount of traffic going through there. Instead of going up through the Red Sea and going through the canal up there, most of the shipping was going around elsewhere. Well, the Biden administration said, hey, we don't like that. So they started using American aircraft carriers to try and keep it open. And they started attacking the Houthis. They shot down lots of missiles, lots of drones that were going into some of these shipping, but they never stopped the Houthis. And then Israel tried the same thing. And there was several times they made big attacks inside Yemen itself. It never stopped the attacks. The only thing that stopped the attacks is when Israel finally had a ceasefire with Hamas, and the Houthis said, that's what we've said all along. That's what this was all about. You have a ceasefire, we'll have a ceasefire. So they stopped their attacks. Well, toward the end of the ceasefire, before it actually fell apart, Israel said they started having some claims against the Hamas people, and they said, all right, we're going to cut off food aid. And so the Houthis said, hang on. If you're going to cut off food aid to the people, the civilians in the strip, then we're going to resume our aerial attacks onto the shipping back in the Red Sea again. Before they could actually act on that, the Trump administration launched this big, huge operation on the 15th of March that was designed to, quote, do what the Biden administration was unable to do. You may recall, I think we've shown part of this before, but to remind you of what the original statement was from the Trump administration, here is Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on the 15th of March.
I want to be very clear. This campaign is about freedom of navigation and restoring deterrence. The minute the Houthis say, we'll stop shooting at your ships, we'll stop shooting at your drones, this campaign will end. But until then, it will be unrelenting. We got the reports last night, Maria. The Houthi capital felt like an earthquake. Dozens and dozens of precision heavy munitions dropping precisely on the targets that we wanted to hit, sending a very clear message. And the message is clear to Iran as well. And the president said it in his truth. Your support of the Houthis needs to end immediately. We will hold you accountable as the sponsor of this proxy. And I echo his statement.
Okay, so that's really this bold and brash statement that we're going to bring a lot of heavy firepower. And even though the Biden administration couldn't succeed, even though the Obama effort, along with Saudi Arabia since 2015, couldn't succeed, we're going to succeed on there. So we're going to bring that firepower to bear. And there have been some huge strikes in the area. There's been big ones in the capital city. There's been some at various ports, etc. There's actually been quite a few more on that in just a second. But I want to show you also that here is a comment from the Houthis from March, where they said that they had previously taken the Harry S. Truman under fire. And then tag into the back of that is a U.S. 3-star general who kind of mocks them for the effort.
مكنت القوات المسلحة اليمنية خلال الساعات الماضية من استهداف حاملة الطائرات الأمريكية USS هاري ترومان شمالي البحر الأحمر، وذلك بصاروخين مجنحين وطائرتين مسيرتين، واستهداف مدمرة أمريكية بصاروخ مجنح وأربع طائرات مسيرة.
The Houthis claim to have tried to attack the Harry S. Truman. Quite frankly, it's hard to tell because while we're executing precision strikes, they missed by over 100 miles. So I would just tell you their effectiveness, I would question anything that they claim in the press that they're doing or not doing. It's very hard to tell what they are just based on their level of incompetence that they've demonstrated.
Based on their level of incompetence that they've demonstrated. What exactly is this level of incompetence? Because they have caused the U.S. aircraft carrier to have to go on an emergency ship, or an emergency shift to where they're trying to evasive control to try to prevent getting hit. We know that there's been a number of attacks on our ships so far. Up to this point, our defense mechanisms have succeeded. We've been able to either shoot down the missiles or avoid them through the maneuvering that we've been doing here. And now you see that it's cost an F-18 fighter jet. So who's the incompetent one now? I mean, you have to ask that question. Hey, if these guys are so incompetent, why did we lose an F-18 aircraft and a tractor and possibly even lost some troops or could at risk doing it because of these incompetent people here? See, we're rolling the dice here that missile didn't get through. That so far, we know of at least some cases where the missiles have gotten very close, dangerously close. So far, none of them have. But what has been the other cost aside from this? Now, somewhere around $60 million jet that just fell in, along with the other tractor that moved in there. We've also had issues with drones. So we've had just since March, since we started this process here, we have lost 7 of these Predator drones have been shot down by the incompetent Houthis since March the 15th. Those things, folks, are about $30 million a pop. Some versions are a little bit more than that if they have different packages on them. But in every case, those things are really expensive. There have been 15 of them going back to October 2023 when we first started trying to take the Houthis under fire during the Biden administration. 15 of these things from the incompetent side of the Houthis. And all of these strikes that we keep having haven't seemed to make any difference. And I want to look at some other costs here. This is from Responsible Statecraft. Just came out this morning in response to all this. If I can pull it up. Sorry, I thought I had it posted in front of me. But, there we go. It says, to date, the U.S. has spent about $3 billion in its recent anti-Houthi campaign since it began in mid-March. $3 billion since the mid-March. They don't have the figures about what the Biden administration had spent before that time, but at least $3 billion since March. It's barely a month and a half from now ago. Hitting over 800 targets. 800 targets we've hit in Yemen, and we have not compelled them to stop doing what they're doing. Where do we go? It's in killing hundreds of civilians in the process. And now the accidental loss of a fighter jet adds tens of millions of dollars more to that. The billions the U.S. has spent in this campaign have resulted in questionable outcomes. CENTCOM says its efforts have degraded the Houthi fighting capacities, yet CNN reported from last month suggested that the campaign had only limited results. Earlier this month, the New York Times reported that in closed briefings, Pentagon officials have acknowledged that there have been only limited success destroying the Houthis' vast, largely underground arsenal of missiles, drones, and launchers. So what we're trying to say is that we've degraded them, and we're showing them a thing or two, and we've got a strong signal to Iran. And you got to ask, what is the message being received? That's the message you want to send. But what's the message being received? Is that they have all these underground facilities, which means that through all the process of us supporting the Saudi Arabians to try and attack them means that they learned how to minimize those capabilities. Now, you can hit targets on the surface all day long, and you can kill lots of innocent civilian people in the process. but you're not getting at the core function of it here. And by the way, if you actually want to keep the Red Sea open, there's a way to do that, and that's to put pressure on Israel to end its war against the Palestinian people. That will work. The Houthis have shown they mean it. When you had a ceasefire before, they were good to their word and they stopped. So if you want the Red Sea to be open, then we have to look at other alternatives, because what sense does it make to keep on risking an American aircraft carrier or any other naval vessel that's part of that strike group, or the loss of any other aircraft, or the loss of our drones, these multi-million-dollar platforms? What are we getting for this? Is American national interest even involved in this? The answer is no. We have a general interest in keeping the global commons open. That is true. That's a general truism. But a very small percent, I think the number is actually 3% of traffic that has to do with American commerce is affected by the traffic in the Red Sea. 3%. That means that 97% is going elsewhere in the world. What if the other countries who had something to do with that, whose economics were affected, maybe they should be trying to do something to open that up? Because imagine, we're spending all this money, billions of dollars, apparently every month that this thing's going on, for the benefit of other countries. And even that's not even really working, because it is only limited and minimized some of the attacks. It has not stopped them. So we are spending our money. We're risking our troops. We're risking our platforms. We're risking our Navy for something that's not even related to American national interest, that costs us billions of dollars, that even to the limited extent it works, primarily benefits other countries. Now, why would we want to keep on doing that? Because listen, we keep going down this path. It's almost inevitable that at some point one of these missiles is finally going to get through. You heard Commodore Jeremy there talking about how this Gatling gun is like the last line of defense, and that is effective out to about 1 mile. And these air missiles travel at very fast, so it takes only seconds to cover a mile. So if one of them finally gets through, and just imagine if all of a sudden at 12 meters off the deck, they slam into an aircraft carrier. I mean, there's going to be how many Americans killed? It's going to be a tremendous gash on the symbol of our power. Our aircraft carriers are one of the absolute symbols of American global power, that we were able to send ships all over the world and influence matters, etc. And it's like the symbol which has never even been touched. Now imagine if that gets gashed over something so stupid as trying to keep the Red Sea open to transit that's not even primarily American. That's barely a fraction of anything that represents American commerce. Why would we want to risk this damage to our credibility? And already the Harry S. Truman actually was in an accident where it ran into another ship about a month and a half or so ago. So that's already kind of an embarrassment. Now because of, apparently we don't know all the details yet, but it appears that we were in the process of just doing some normal movement on their aircraft carrier, and all of a sudden the alarm goes off and they find out that we have to immediately get into evasive maneuvers or risk losing the ship. So you see that how fast things can turn. And I'm telling you, we don't want to find out what happens if one of our ships get hit and one of our sailors get killed. Why should we risk the life of one American in with their aircraft, Air Force, or naval pilots or Navy personnel in these ships? Why should we risk any lives over something that's not even related to American national security? Because this isn't. I don't care what anybody in the Pentagon wants to say. This is about arrogance. We want them to stop. We want to tell you're going to do what we tell you, or we're going to bomb you. That I guess feeds your ego, does nothing for American national security, and it costs a huge amount of money, because that money's coming out of somewhere, folks. That's money that we shouldn't have had to spend, and now that it's gone, and that's just a net loss. And I just don't want us to ever get to the point to where we have to explain to somebody's mother, somebody's wife, somebody's brother or husband or father that their service member was killed because we want to look tough. It's just not going to play well then. And we shouldn't have to do that. Anyway, that's where we are today. We're going to come back with Andrei Martyanov later in the afternoon. We're going to talk about some updates and some things that have been happening with the Russia-Ukraine war. That'll be at 4 p.m. on Eastern time. Thank you very much for being with us today. Be sure and like and subscribe. That helps us out more than you may know before you leave today. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next episode, Daniel Latest Deep Dive.